Hello. Today's presentation is the final part of a series of videos where I've discussed VPNs and proxies, as a way of circumventing internet censorship and surveillance. Today I am going to set up a regular SOCKS5 proxy to act as an intermediary between myself and a public resource on the internet. My proxy's only function will be to redirect my web traffic, while masking my IP address, thus hiding my real location. This can be useful for a variety of reasons, and I will discuss those. But there's a lot of confusion about VPNs and proxies in general. The reason being, that users are unclear about who, or what, they are trying to protect themselves from. Censorship or surveillance. And from whom? Your ISP? The destination server? A lot of subtlety in these issues gets lost in most internet guides. So let me spend a few minutes clearing up some of these concepts, before moving on to the technicals. You really need to understand the nuance of this, to wisely choose the right tool for the job. There's a server on the internet I want to access. It can be a website, an application, whatever. Here's my first problem. I need an internet service provider to grant me access. The ISP knows about every resource I access online. Over time, this amounts to an obscene amount of data. All of it tied to my identity. And of course, the ISP can deny me access to any service they like. Or rather, don't like. If I try using the Tor network, the ISP might disapprove. In some countries they won't just block you. They will call the cops on you. If I'm lucky enough to live in a jurisdiction where Tor is not censored, my ISP won't be able to know about my destination. But the server that I'm trying to access might block traffic coming from Tor exit nodes, whose IP addresses are publicly known. Okay. Let's say I pay a VPN provider and have access to any of their servers running on multiple jurisdictions, thus hiding the traffic from my ISP. This alone is illegal in some countries. But assuming I'm okay there, the VPN itself has effectively turned into my new ISP. The VPN servers are the new source of my traffic, and they are logging everything. If you think they are not, I'm sorry to break it to you. You have been listening to one too many influencers online. Let me put it this way. Nobody from your favorite VPN provider is going to jail for your $5 a month. Don't get me wrong. Third-party VPN providers are very useful to hide the real source of your traffic from its destination. Except, it knows it's coming from a VPN, and might choose to block it. This, by the way, is an increasingly common occurrence everywhere. You can change servers all you want. The IP ranges from all VPN providers are well known. You can try self-hosting your own VPN, in a data center, in a jurisdiction of your choice, as I did in my first WireGuard video. If the server you're accessing cares only about blocking certain IPs, then you're probably fine. But if it is VPN traffic they have a problem with, they can figure out that you're using one, by inspecting your traffic. And you will be, you guessed it, blocked. To fix this, I released another video where I showed you how to make your WireGuard traffic look like HTTP over TLS web traffic. And it kinda works. Most of the time. The fact of the matter is, that deep packet inspection, when deployed, can usually uncover this, and other shenanigans that go on at multiple layers of the OSI model. This is where it gets interesting. Shadow SOCKS. This is a proxy-based solution, that uses encryption to tunnel from a client to a remote server, while hiding the fact that it is doing so. It does this very successfully, providing privacy everywhere. The sophistication of shadow SOCKS traffic masquerading techniques, makes it the most censorship-resistant solution that I have tried to date. Its only drawback though, is that you need to control a server in a country outside the censoring jurisdiction. Okay. So if Shadow Socks is so great, why bother with something else? Why even look into proxies? And what are proxies anyway? Proxies redirect traffic. They are intermediaries between senders and recipients, and can be used for many different purposes. Here are a couple of examples. You can run a proxy inside a local network acting as a gateway to the internet, while only allowing specific users. Or, you can turn a proxy into a network filter, restricting traffic to certain websites. That kind of thing. For our purposes, I am not going to complicate things that much. The first setup that I will show you goes something like this. My proxy will sit on the internet, and it will just forward traffic to its destination. All traffic. From anyone who connects to it. Without any rules nor restrictions. Pretty straightforward. Similar to the kind of proxies that you might have seen listed on countless websites that encourage you to please use them for free. In my opinion, proxies occupy a few niche use cases that are worth mentioning. But before I do that, let me tell you something about SOCKS5 Proxies. Listen to this. Proxies can see your full forward route. Even if a proxy is just a link in a concatenation of proxies, it knows the destination address, plus all the hops to get there, not just the IP of the next server in the chain. If the proxy you're using happens to use client authentication, your username and your password will be sent in clear text. Anyone sniffing your traffic will be able to gain access to your account. The proxy can modify your traffic. It can change what it sends and receives on your behalf, and you wouldn't know about it. Oh, and all of those free proxies that you can find online are definitely logging your data and selling it. This doesn't look good. But even though proxies are so insecure, there's some scenarios where you wouldn't mind using them. When privacy is not such a big deal. Or when you consider them as disposable resources to be used for a brief time, and for a specific purpose. For example, you're interested in web content that is restricted to the country is hosted in. Nothing controversial. You might want to watch a documentary not available in your home country. By connecting to proxies located in those jurisdictions, you can easily access that content. Your ISP can see what's going on, but probably won't try to enforce policies that have nothing to do with it, nor with its jurisdiction. You can always use a VPN if the ISP is a problem, but the issue here is what these guys see. Just an IP address in their jurisdiction. As we learned before, traffic coming from a VPN server can be blocked. But with a proxy, especially if you self-host one, you have better odds. And increased bandwidth as well. And again, your ISP is probably not even aware of the random content and access policies that a server in another country imposes on its users. Another popular use case for proxies is network scanning. If you aggressively scan a well-managed server, your IP address will be insta-banned. Using a chain of disposable proxies fixes this. First of all, since the logs of your activity are in different jurisdictions, tracking the source of the traffic would be very difficult. And second, you can afford to lose an IP. Just change the route. Learn from what happened, and try again. By the way, in this particular setup, the first proxy would be able to see my entire route. Perhaps it would be smart to self-host this one. This is what the second proxy sees. This is what the next one sees. And this is what the destination sees. Anyway, although I will show you how to concatenate proxies, this is not what I'm interested in. My main concern is using proxies to protect against censorship and surveillance. Okay. This is the last thing I will say before I start setting up proxies. I promise. Just because you have the skill to do something, it doesn't mean that you should do it. It might sound cool to say that you concatenate self-hosted proxies over Tor, but perhaps what you're doing doesn't make any sense, or is counterproductive. Remember what I said in the beginning. Be aware, of what, and who, you are protecting against. If I want to access a service by using a proxy, adding another proxy is usually not going to add anything. It probably does more harm than good. My ISP is going to know more stuff about me, and there's an additional proxy that's also logging web activity tied to my IP. Perhaps it makes more sense to route my traffic this way. But most of the time, a single proxy will suffice. Self-hosted or otherwise. Another all-time favorite in online proxy guides, is to include Tor when you use a chain of proxies. If you do some research about this, you will find that this is not secure. Part of your traffic will leak out of your Tor tunnel. So I would discourage this. If protecting from the ISP is an issue for you, just use a VPN, or use Tor properly. What I am going to cover in this guide, is how to set up a single self-hosted proxy, to act as an intermediary between your ISP and a destination server, using the command line, and a web browser. I will also show you a way of using your VPS as a proxy to circumvent the ISP surveillance, without the need of a proxy server. And if you want to route your traffic over Tor, on the command line, use Tor SOCKS. And for web browsing, use the Tor browser. And yes, you can add a proxy, safely, in Settings Connection. As I showed in my Shadow SOCKS video, and my Snowflake video. I'll touch on these issues as I go along. Once you learn how to set up and use proxies, there's so many ways you can use them in combination with each other, and with tools like VPNs and Tor. I cannot cover all the possible permutations and potential fuck-ups that you might stumble into. So understand the issues I've just discussed. Think adversarially. And think for yourself. I've just bought a VPS, and I am accessing it for the first time. There are videos linked below where you can see me go through all I'm about to do, in greater detail. So first, upgrade and reboot. I will change the default port for SSH, and disable password authentication. Writing an entry for my server, in the client's SSH config file. I will enable the firewall, and allow incoming connections for SSH. Now I will protect SSH from brute force attacks by installing fail to ban. The VPS is ready to host a proxy server. I am going to install Dante, a SOCKS5 proxy server. Configuring Dante for our simple purpose is very easy. The only thing you need to know before setting it up is the name of your external network interface. This is mine. It might be different for you. Let's edit Dante's configuration file. As I explained during the introduction, our proxy is just going to forward traffic to a destination. No rules, no restrictions. Add these options to the log output. This will be important later, during part 4. The internal and external keywords are used to specify the addresses that the server should bind to. You can also specify a network interface. Note that the server will be listening for SOCKS requests, on port 1080. You can change it if you like. Now I need to specify two kinds of authentication rules. With these settings, anybody will be able to connect and use our proxy. None of the keywords that you see here are really required. But commenting user privileged and leaving user unprivileged as nobody ensures that the server will try to avoid running as the root user, even if started by root. Finally, scroll down and write your SOCKS client access rules. I'm not imposing any restrictions whatsoever. Anyone will be able to route all their traffic through my proxy. Please include error in the log options. Otherwise, you won't be able to follow part 4 of this video. Restart the Dante process. And you're done. My proxy server is listening on port 1080. Add a firewall rule. And let's test it. First, redirecting web traffic from the command line. Make sure you have proxy chains. If not, install this package and edit its configuration file. Please make sure that the option, Proxy DNS, is uncommented. Scroll down and add your proxy. Type IP address and port. If you use the command curl on ifconfig.io, it will return the IP address that's making the request, my home IP. If I proceed any command with proxy chains, I will route my traffic through the proxies included in the proxy chains configuration file. The request was sent by my proxy. This is what the destination server sees. Now let's test a web browser, Firefox. This is my home IP. To redirect your traffic through a proxy, go to Settings. Scroll down, Network Settings, Manual Configuration, and add your SOCKS5 proxy. Please select Proxy DNS when using SOCKS. Let's check my IP again. My VPS in Iceland. Always perform an extended DNS leak test. So this is how easy it is to use your proxy for web browsing. If you want to bypass it, just go to Settings. So my proxy is working, and anyone can connect to it. Now I will show you how to restrict access, adding client authentication to your server. Edit your Dante configuration file. Change SOCKS method from none to username. Restart Dante. And the server is ready. The username authentication method uses your system password file to verify a username and password combination supplied by a Linux user as part of the SOCKS version 5 authentication process. In other words, from now on, you will be able to use the proxy only if you know the password of a Linux user in the server. It is an ingenious and simple way of managing access to the proxy. You have to be careful though. Remember what I said during the introduction. With this authentication method, the passwords are transmitted in clear text between the client and the server. The users that you create for this purpose should be system accounts with limited capabilities that cannot log in onto the system. The following command will do precisely this. I will create a user for myself with a random password. Now only I can use the proxy. Let me rearrange a couple of terminal windows, so I can follow Dante's logs below, while I try accessing it in the upper window. I get the error, client offered no acceptable authentication method, so let's provide proxy chains with my credentials. Just add your username and password to your proxy entry. And try again. It works. Let's see what an authentication failure looks like. I will modify my password. The logs for authentication failures. Print the IP that failed the challenge. This is very convenient, because it means that I can set up a fail-to-ban jail, and protect my proxy from brute force attacks. I already installed fail-to-ban in part 1, to protect my server from SSH brute force attacks. Let's see if I have a filter and jail for Dante. No filter. And no jail. Whenever you need a fail-to-ban filter and jail for some service, make sure that you are running the latest release. Fail-to-ban devs add new services all the time, so let's look in their GitHub first, before looking elsewhere. Well, I'm not running the latest release, but I have checked and version 1.0.2 does not include a jail for Dante either. The good news is, that a filter and jail for Dante were merged recently into the master branch. A reminder that you should always take a look in GitHub, not only for new releases, but for specific questions that are either resolved in issues, or code already merged into the master branch, but not yet tagged, nor present in an official release. Here you can find the filter for Dante. Copy it, and paste it into your server. Okay, this is important. There's a current move away from logs based on the traditional syslog system, towards systemd-journal. I favor adapting to the journal, so I will have to tweak the fail-to-ban configuration file if I want this filter to work properly. The same goes for the jail. This jail will work perfectly well with systemd-journal logs, but not with the regular syslog. Paste it into your jail.local file. Enable the jail. And to change fail-to-ban to logs based on systemd-journal, change the backend option, from auto to systemd. Restart fail-to-ban and check that everything is okay. These options are documented on the jail-to-ban config file, as well as in the var log directory, on those systems that are undergoing the migration. All Debian based. So let's test the jail for Dante. Let's watch it in real time as I failed to authenticate. The filter has already picked from the logs my previous authentication failure. Remember that in part 1 of this video, I reduced to 3, the maximum number of allowed failures before banning an IP. If I try accessing the server 2 more times, I should have my IP banned. 2 and 3 to jail. Even if I provide the correct password, I won't be allowed in. So the Dante filter and jail work as expected. Okay. I will cheat, and get myself out of jail. Client authentication is working again on the command line. But what about web browsing? There's no obvious way of providing login credentials for proxies. An extremely popular solution for browsers based on Firefox and Chrome is adding an extension called SOCKS5 Proxies. Stay away from this extension. If you analyze traffic coming in and out of proxies that you control, let's just say that SOCKS5 Proxies has leaking problems. Also, it doesn't do what it claims to do. More on that later, in part 7. But I have to give it to them. The fox is so cute. This is where you would write your proxy's username and password. Anyway, nuke it, and do it this other way. Proxy chains. Firefox. So, if anyone sniffing the traffic of your SOCKS server's IP can read the password in clear text, that's not so hot, is it? Let's try something else that might or might not work for you. Restricting access to your server by IP. You've been hearing me say that this is my home IP. Well, actually it isn't. I'm behind a VPN, with a pinned IP, which means that I can have the same IP for years if I want to. Of course, I am sharing these addresses with other users, which by the way is a great way of obfuscating my traffic. But if what you want is a static IP, this is a great way of getting one, as a budget compromise solution for non-critical operations. So although imperfect, this method will allow any IP that you specify, exclusive access to your server. It goes without saying that you can combine both methods, client authentication, and restrictions by IP. And although that would be a more robust system, for simplicity's sake, I'm going to revert to no authentication at all. SSH into the server and edit the Dante configuration file. In your SOCKS client access rules, specify your IP as the only allowed traffic source. Restart Dante, and it's done. Testing. It works. What happens if I change the allowed IP? Couldn't connect to server. Restricting access by IP is working. How do you allow access from other IP addresses? The easiest way is to just copy-paste the client pass block and add a new IP. Okay, I'm going to leave everything as it was and move on to the next section. Now here's something cool. I am going to use my VPS as a proxy, without using any dedicated software. Moreover, the communications between my client and the VPS will be encrypted via a secure tunnel. And the only thing I need is to have SSH access to the server. No Dante, no configuration, no additional firewall rules. Take a look at the SSH man page. Option, capital D. Read this. SSH into your server, with the option capital D. Just specify a port where the service will be listening, and it will bind by default to your local host. Look how easy it is. Now I have a secure and private SOCKS proxy server, over SSH. The tunnel will be up and running for as long as I keep the SSH connection going. Let's check that the server is indeed running. There it is. Listening on port 12345. I'll bring down the server by disconnecting from the VPS. If you don't want to log into a remote shell on your VPS, just add the option, N, to suppress remote command execution. Let's add the proxy into proxy chains. And test it. It works. A private and secure SOCKS5 proxy. Let's try it out in Firefox. Cool. Now let me give you a few hints for running and managing the SOCKS SSH tunnel in your system. You disconnect by pressing Ctrl+C. You can start the process in the background, adding an ampersand. If you're still running the shell from where you initiated the process, you can stop the server with the command kill. Like this. You can also stop it by specifying its process ID. If you try doing this from another shell, you can find the process ID with the command pgrep. Now I am going to add additional proxies to my proxy chains route. This particular proxy could be a free proxy, or a self-hosted one. Let's see if it's working. It is. And it is indeed located in Austria. I will add yet another proxy. Let's test it as well. Right. So I have access to 3 working proxies. Forcing my traffic through a specific route is as easy as adding proxies to my proxy list in the proxy chains configuration file. With these settings, my traffic will be forwarded to the proxy in Austria first, that will in turn forward it to the proxy in Switzerland. So from the point of view of the destination server, the source of my traffic will be in Switzerland. Look at the logs. You can see the hops between myself and the destination server. The increased latency is also noticeable. Now I will change the route. Switzerland first, and Austria second. Okay. Let's add my self-hosted proxy in Iceland to the beginning of the route. It took a while, but it works correctly. Given everything I've done during this video, what would happen if I moved my proxy in Iceland to the last hop in the route? I'll give you a few seconds to think about it. The destination server is not getting my requests. Why? Because in Part 5 I restricted access to the proxy server in Iceland, by IP. My home IP. So in its present configuration, it needs to be at the beginning of the route. This is how you add the Tor network to proxy chains. Please remember what I said in the introduction about leaks using this method. The first hop is the Tor network itself. The second, the proxy in Switzerland. Running a Tor-only, proxy chain's Firefox command should show a Tor exit node. And again, don't use proxy chains for Tor. Just use the Tor browser. In Settings, Connection, you can add a proxy as an entry into the Tor network. This is a very effective way of protecting yourself against surveillance within the Tor network itself. You need to restart the Tor browser. And although your proxy doesn't show in the Tor Circuit UI, it is there. Please check my Snowflake proxy video, if you want to see me verify that this is indeed the case. And remember, the safest way of redirecting your command line traffic through Tor is Tor SOCKS. By the way, all the proxies were self-hosted. But my choices of jurisdiction were not random. Yes, these are countries next to me. But there's something else that they all have in common. If you don't know what I'm talking about, and you are unaware of the 5, 9, and 14 eyes alliances, please stop what you're doing and go watch the introduction of my first WireGuard video. You're welcome.